Am I live? Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch, and for those of us in Brussels or in the south of Europe, had a bit of cool air. Now we will start our first plenary session. In this session, we are going to summarize the discussions that we've just heard from the 5 parallel sessions, that is, discussions relating to the sectors of infrastructures, raw materials, and etc. And we will now discuss the synergies between these sectors and, of course, open the floor to questions from the audience. So I am joined here by Lefteris. Lefteris, are you with us? Lefteris, you are muted, but you can start already. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. So, hello, everyone. We are going to now be discussing the outcomes of the different parallel sessions that some of you have joined in to listen in. And hopefully we will see some synergies or perhaps the differences that apply between the different sessions. So you will see the 3 rapporteurs from the morning sessions present what was discussed. And after that, we can have a discussion on how this all will work out. So without further ado, I would pass the floor to Jennifer Bailey from the National Observatory of Athens to tell us more about the urban sector.
Thank you. During our session, we really focused on looking at the issues such as how EO relates in urban context. So since population is growing, cities are becoming more energy demanding, and we are expecting much more urbanization in the near future. These trends kind of force us to focus on how can we enhance urban resilience, how can we foster sustainable urbanization, which is where efforts like carbon neutrality, different goals like that play an essential role. And in this regard, the relevant policy agendas and frames tackling issues can be brought together under the context of the new urban agenda. So bringing the urban context to kind of tie all these different issues together, climate change, disaster risk reduction, looking through the urban lens can really drive forward efforts in other areas as well. So Earth observations have a crucial role to play here, strong value proposition in terms of cities. Particularly in our session, we discussed some priority areas where EO can help us, looking at things like greening, observing and monitoring human settlements, urban heat islands, and other aspects like that. And in terms of actually addressing these issues using EO, a huge point that was raised was creating a common language. So maybe even relearning how we speak about EO, for example, from the EO community, trying to figure out what city practitioners actually need, and kind of highlighted that there are 3 C's in this regard. So communication, collaboration, cooperation. These are very important for cities, an imperative to avoid cities from working in silos, as well as avoiding fragmentation. So it's important to bring in the multi-stakeholder perspective. So the whole chain, having the city practitioners, the researchers, the entrepreneurs, the citizens all together to help identify what's happening in different cities around the world, which can help other cities address similar needs they might have. But it's also important to understand kind of how EO fits, how we can raise awareness, and what's important to different cities. We also really focused on training, so learning from one another, instead of proposing an EO solution to a practitioner, having the conversation be between practitioner to practitioner to really understand the true problem that cities need, and then how EO can really address that problem. It's less about the solution, more about fully understanding what the needs are. In terms of challenges that exist, I already mentioned the fragmentation, kind of people working in silos, use cases can really help us in terms of bridging these gaps. So identifying how EO is already being used in certain cases, addressing well-defined challenges. We can, instead of focusing on forging ahead with the solution, actually listen to the problems, and then focus on a solution that would be sustainable. So not ending when a project ends, but rather having some sort of future plan and being integrated into a city's practices. And in terms of opportunities, we focused on kind of livability as being really important because it brings citizens and people in the cities into the discussion. It also forges a connection with the citizens. A part of that is well-being. Another opportunity is resilience and sustainability, kind of bringing the EO community in as they can observe different parts of the city, identify where the problems might be, and work with the relevant stakeholders to help heal aspects that need to be addressed. And also, we discussed issues around procurement, capacity building, and funding. And in terms of procurements, it's a difficult problem to address as it's different in each city. It can be different in each city, but movement is happening in this area. There is a focus on this. And in terms of funding, it's less of an issue. The funding exists, but it's more about trying to fund the solutions to the real problems. Capacity building and development are important aspects, like I mentioned. So bringing citizens in, citizen science is an easy way to get involved here, and opening the door to what Earth observation has to offer, especially in the city context. And EO is really, at the end of the day, a useful tool because cities are where most changes are happening, and it's also where most opportunities lie. So the challenges can really be identified and illuminated and highlighted by Earth observation. And solutions can come from engaging with the city to identify and address these true problems and integrating all of these different aspects. So technology might be a tool that can help build resilience in a city, but it's really a combination of technology, tools, conversations, talking the same language that can help us find the answer. And it was highlighted that being nimble and flexible is really important as we move forward in this discussion, because cities will have to address a constantly changing, complex set of challenges.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer. Thanks for giving us this overview of what was discussed in Urban. I'll pass the floor now to Steen Smet from Verheert, who will give us a similar taste from the raw material side.
Yeah, Lefteris, thank you for inviting me here for reporting on the focus group that we had on raw materials. What we started from, of course, is what we all pretty much know, is that there's huge global challenges facing us, increasing population, but also an increasing demand for raw materials. Still, more than 70% of all resources are not recycled and come from mining sources. So those challenges are, of course, well known, but when we post the question in one of these polls, the main challenge for our sector seems to be responsible sourcing and responsible production of these raw materials. And they were even prioritized over price volatility or security of supply. Although we have, of course, discussed a lot on the security of supply, as a lot of these raw materials still come from unstable regions. A lot of them come from China, and yeah, just a small fraction of it comes from Europe-based countries. So that was on the challenge, which was a bit setting the scene. And then we talked about what are some opportunities for EO. Of course, we had the assistance of our great evangelist, Irene, and she pointed out that there's a lot of application potential in all stages of mining. We can think of applications starting from exploration of large areas to exploitation of these mines, and even to post-mining applications. For example, on how to detect ores in large areas, how to monitor remotely on specific areas. We saw examples of early warning systems for potential collapses. monitoring of spillage, of acid mine drainage, and even tracing of illegal mining activity. So that was really insightful to see all these different potential applications fields. And the beauty of it is that they don't only create cost effectiveness for the mining industry in their operations, it also provides safety enhancements for the people who are involved in the mining industry, but it also creates communication and transparency options for the local communities, for NGOs that are involved. So EO truly can leverage a lot of potential in this industry. Then we talked about the topic, of course, which might be the elephant in the room. It's on the negative perception of the mining industry. And for this, we saw that Earth observation data can provide transparency and trustworthy data for local communities. Of course, it will take time to earn the trust of these local communities and the social license to operate, but although we saw that there's quite some potential. According to our poll, I think almost everyone noted down that EO will generate the most value in environmental monitoring use cases, although there's plenty potential still. Then we talked about how to bring this opportunity forward, and then we said that the main challenge for Earth observation in this industry is to create valuable solutions for the end users. So the panelists urge really to consider the development of downstream applications tailored to the needs of the end users, and don't just push technology propositions. We need to really consider, what do NGOs need? What do local communities exactly want to provide, for example, this social license to operate? And then last but not least, that's my closing point, in order to make the best out of it, it was also discussed that we need to consider valorizing the data. Dealing with all the available data is seen as one of the paramount items for success, and a lot of AI applications will enable processing, a lot of monitoring, a lot of detection applications automatically, but of course, we need to consider that all these different data piles should be connected to databases and applications to become valuable. So therefore, finally, the panelists urge us for more networking in this quadruple helix model, where we find synergies between stakeholders to really leverage the opportunities of EO in this domain. And that's it for my focus group.
Thanks very much, Stan. And now we'll pass on the floor to Remco Teiken from the World Geospatial Industry Council to tell us about infrastructure.
Thank you so much. The session I'm going to summarize is called Advancing the Digitalization of Infrastructure. And it started out with Helen Roth of Vital Infrastructure Arena. She was showing us major challenges and ambitions in safe, smart and sustainable infrastructure. Well, infrastructure here concerns rail, road, air or airports. The most important goal, according to her, is to pave the way for increased innovation capacity, strengthen the market and competitiveness, and facilitate collaboration across borders. And when mentioning the vast investments that will be needed, she implicitly hinted at getting new technologies and new ways of working in. Helen explained that observation will be needed to support large upcoming megastructures across Europe, like Germany, Norway, and she mentioned really vast subsea road tunnels as an illustration. And as for our aging infrastructure, the stuff that's already there, Earth observation also supports mega renovation projects to upgrade those. Infrastructure asset life cycle is complex and it's costly. The infrastructure sector should work through the entire life cycle, though, of all the assets that they build and design across borders and outside their conventional silos, be it road owners, construction companies, small startups, or fire and rescue services. And connecting should become the new normal to build better infrastructure. And connect Earth observation into this life cycle will actually improve and support to achieve our common support to achieve our common goals. And the common goals are relevant areas within the infrastructure cycle are planning, operation, and maintenance. Well, of course, in that cycle of infrastructure life cycle stuff, we should not be forgetting developing and preservation of the assets. But planning, operation, and maintenance are the obvious stages where Earth observation can help. I'm struggling to get to my next page because I have some textual help here. The second speaker was Lucy Kennedy. She's one of our Earth observation evangelists today, and she's also CEO of Spotted. She gave her perspective on EO. Well, she's also seeing a huge amount of investment, especially in Europe. The Green Deal, creating a challenge for the infrastructure industry. Earth observation could enable the sector make more informed choices in terms of planning, because 20 plus years of data gives us a view on the progression of things in the past. It helps us in planning the future, where to locate your novel infrastructure, how climate change will be impacted, how did it evolve before. Operations, how to lower operational costs. INSAR imagery is able to detect land motion, bridge deformations. How would somebody start digging close to infrastructure? Okay. If you would know and could predict the environmental conditions their assets are experiencing. From maintenance point of view, shift from schedule-based maintenance towards more risk-based maintenance strategies. Those bridges, you could check bridges with a higher risk, but you do them more regularly than the others. This is a place where Earth observation tools can really help. Do we understand how environmental conditions affect the lifetime of those actual assets? Well, at this point we don't, but moving towards risk-based maintenance, we should. Lucy said the mass market does not exist yet. Thus, we must remove the barriers, gain knowledge on analytics, and show cost versus value. So that's basically where she was. And then a panel discussion was started with some more speakers coming in. Also, there were public questions concerning smaller companies. As a small and medium enterprise, a barrier that you need to deal with are big companies and governments with complex rules and regulations. One of the answers coming from our panel is coming from Lucy, and she said, yeah, what more and more big companies, and to some extent governments are doing, is trying to make their purchasing processes more SME friendly. But this was concurred, this was also said, oh, I'm starting to wrap up now. It's by Roy Haskening, DHV, telling that they are actually working together with SMEs in order to help them in specialist solutions. Additional needs and barriers, that we are very product-based, and we start to think in portfolio terms. We should think bigger, think out of the box, and then making an ecosystem thinking is a good way to pursue. We lack training to understand the value of the data in the infrastructure sector. That's what Julia Gozzini of SINA ASTM said. Arild of Cervic Construction brought in a nice real-life example. NASA's ship detection system is based on AIS. Why don't we think about something similar for our road networks? Why don't we monitor on continuous basis road safety, road performance, etc.? That's where Earth observation comes in. Well, other gaps and challenges in terms of uptake were there. Most of them concern marketing. Earth observation is not yet considered as a discriminant and unique technology. We should change that. The actual problem, concludes Helen Roth, is the lack of deal flow. So with this, I would like to conclude to stay in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Remco. These are very interesting topics that you brought up from your discussion. I noted down a few themes that seem to have gone through all three sessions. One was security of supply. Even in urban, we were discussing about supply chain and how things that happen in one part of the world may affect how things are happening in another city. The same, of course, applies to raw materials and to infrastructure. The quadruple helix, it's a nice buzzword, but it's also a very necessary reality. So it's nice that this came through sort of this multi-stakeholder cooperation in all sessions. And of course, everything that goes around the value proposition of Earth observation, understanding it, communicating it, testing it, and then of course helping those that would benefit from it to actually do so. So with this, I would pass the floor back to Martin, and I suppose we can also have a few questions. Martin. Okay, be ready.
Dear audience, it seems we have encountered some technical difficulties, for which we apologize. In the age of COVID and virtual events, even 1 year on, I think it's normal to still say that it's normal to have these kind of difficulties, but let's just address them and move on. As I was saying, we've just heard from Lefteris and our 3 first rapporteurs who summarized the findings of the first cluster of FIRE parallel sessions. Now, let's delve and dive deep into the second cluster, which will start at 2. In this cluster, we're going to be looking at the sectors of wind energy, marine and maritime, and agriculture. Please join and feel free to log your questions and further contribute to formulating the first mission of FIRE, which is to produce a strategic and research innovation roadmap for Earth observation activities in Europe. Together, I'm sure we can do it. Thank you. Testing. Is it? Welcome back, dear audience. We have just heard from the fire sessions where we talked about wind energy, agriculture and maritime, and the challenges and opportunities for Earth observation update. And now we proceed to the second plenary, where we will summarize the findings of these discussions and of course try to find some synergies between these, some could say interdependent sectors, and further contribute to the strategic research and innovation agenda for EU activities in Europe. So please enjoy. Check, check. Check. Where's your box? Yeah, just go to the stories.
The electricity part in the energy mix will shift towards 57%, which is a huge transformation coming ahead. What
So good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the small delay due to some technical issues. I'm joined by 3 people, good friends, good colleagues, who would be reporting on what was discussed with wind energy, agriculture, and maritime and marine. So without further ado, I pass the floor to Danny Robrecht from Vergeert, who will tell us all about wind energy. Danny, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lev, for having me this afternoon. Well, we were discussing Earth observation opportunities in wind energy, and the sector represents a huge potential. Today, the sector has about 220 gigawatts installed base, and it represents in the energy mix 25% of the demand. And because Europe wants to be carbon neutral by 2050, that energy mix is going to shift to 57% depending on electrification, which is a huge growth. And for wind turbines, that means that the installed base has to increase with 5 to 6 times more than there is today. And obviously, we can ask ourselves, can we find sufficient number of locations? Will we have technology that provides sufficient output and production? And will we have solid policy making in order to make this happen? The wind energy sector is looking at upscaling offshore windmills, but also wants to untap or tap into the potential of floating offshore turbines. Obviously, installed base has to be reconfigured by repowered or more powerful wind turbines. I will have to find a way to integrate wind turbines more into our onshore areas by having windmills that are less noisy, visually more attractive, etc., etc. Earth observation can play an interesting role in that. It can help scaling the industry, and it can help lowering the costs. Basically, we see 3 applications where Earth observation can really make a difference. The first one is basically wind energy forecasting. If we have to provide 57% of the energy mix by 2050, then we need to ensure that we can provide that capacity, and forecasting what wind energy can provide in a particular time, near real time, in the next few hours, in the next few days, is obviously very interesting in order to ensure the provision of electrification. The second application is wind farms planning, basically choosing locations. If we intend to have 5 to 6 times more installed capacity, also onshore, but also offshore, then we have to find ways then we have to find the right locations. We need to understand what happened over time with particular landslides, or we have to see elevation models of terrain and terrain models. We have to understand how they evolve over time in order to site basically and to select sites in a safe and sustainable manner. And the third application was about Earth observation could help in predicting better the weather basically, and to make sure that the planning of operation in hazardous environments is improved over time. Basically, we see a sector which is very interested in Earth observation. They are already starting to make use of it, let's say in the back office, in the planning and the siting, which is the most urgent applications of the 3. I understood. But the sector is obviously looking at Earth observation as a substitute for manners as they work today. And as in any substitute, the sector demands themselves, either you perform better and cheaper, or either you perform radically better at the same cost. And the business cases have not been proven yet entirely to the industry. The industry is also facing a challenge to whom to talk to. In a sense, they don't have the in-house skills and capacity to deal with the complex data, to harmonize the data, to develop the models and the algorithms, and to build solutions. So they are looking, while the industry on Earth observation side has all the building blocks and the puzzles in place, but the value chain might not be organized in such a way that service providers are easy accessible by industry partners. So that's a challenge at both ends, I think, and also at Earth observation end. In our discussion, basically, we concluded 3 major steps to be taken. I think the sector of wind energy needs to talk more to Earth observation specialists in order to understand what it can do, how it can work, and where to go to, basically. A second thing that we put up front was data products have to be standardized, they have to be harmonized, they have to be they have to be accessible, basically easy to fit and transfer them into data products which are useful for wind energy end users. And the third action we put up front was basically we have to drive more tests, we have to drive more pilots. Maybe de-risking the adoption. Maybe funding can help in that, obviously, in order to adopt and de-risk quicker and making sure that Earth observation is being transferred and adopted more rapidly by the industry. Once that's being done, Lev, I think then it becomes a challenge to make Earth observation the new golden standard, because it has all the potential to become very, very important for this rapid growing industry. And maybe one bold question to put up front is, if we talk about siting location, then this could also help, Earth observation data could also help policymakers to basically streamline the process of permitting, because that's slowing down because of complexity. And obviously, if you start to permit, you have to understand also in which kind of areas to permit, and that has a link to the siting problematics of the industry. Lev, I hope that I gave a kind of a good, comprehensive and clear depiction of what we have been discussing. So over to you.
Thank you, Danny. You certainly did. Thanks a lot for bringing many interesting points. I think there is good sense that some of the other, probably more traditional sectors in terms of using Earth observation will tell us that there will be definitely similarities there. So in that regard, I would like to pass now the floor to Karel Kallever from VVA, who would summarize what was discussed with Marine and Maritime. Karel, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Lev, and good afternoon, everyone. As indeed, we discussed how to reach the sustainable blue economy in our sessions this afternoon. And the session actually started with a question on why Earth observation data and information is so fitting for the maritime and marine sector. And the answer was very simple. It was basically that there are no infrastructures that are blocking any of the satellites and all the data we can get. So that was the immediate introduction to the session, and we started basically with an overview of the maritime and the marine industry, how it is a sector with a huge diversity in activities and in stakeholders, how it is expected to bring in almost 3 trillion by 2030 at the global level. We saw that, maybe not surprisingly, that tourism is one of the biggest elements of the maritime and the marine industry, and when it comes to employment and when it comes to the creation of added value, followed by port operations and the maritime transport. And from this, we actually moved into all of the evolutions that went through Earth observation data, how it went from the 80s with fairly low resolution pictures to the kind of information we can collect now. When it comes to Earth observation data and all the needs that arise, the needs are clearly linked with the mid-ocean data, with awareness, maritime awareness, with monitoring of all activities on the oceans and seas, and also linked with the near shore pollution and all the negative consequences caused by our human activities on our oceans and seas. So we have an abundance of data, and there's more and more data and information coming from our Earth, from our planet, that we are able to collect with Earth observation. But it is also raising way more questions than actually answers. And it is true, there's this famous question, do we know more about space than we actually know about oceans? And yes, there's a lot of information that we're still not knowing about our oceans. And Earth observation is basically a very useful tool to provide more data and more information and more insights in our oceans. It gives a global picture. It is never sleeping, so it keeps on collecting data, and it also provides data where even the human eye would not even be able to see. So these were the high-level advantages of EO in the maritime and marine field. So when talking about specific Earth observation applications, we looked into how the use of Earth observation is being used for monitoring of vessels, how it allows for ship detection, allows for legal and illegal activities to be spotted and monitored. We looked into the oil spill monitoring, how it not only provides an image of where it currently is, but also how it evolves over time. The same can be said for the harmful algae bloom, which can be easily monitored through Earth observation data, as well as any offshore assets monitoring and activity monitoring. So we discussed these activities. We discussed which kind of users would be the most prominent ones in these fields, and when we then continued the discussion and the presentations into a bit more field-like, who should start really using EO data, who can reap benefits from it. It was clear that the tourism sector, as one of the biggest ones in this field, can definitely benefit from relying and using EO data. So that was a very, very strong point and a very interesting point. When talking about the added value or the value propositions of Earth observation data, we made a link with the poll that was actually ongoing in the side of the panel, where we were asking what are the main drivers of Earth observation. Is it climate change? Is it the technology adaptation? Is it the human population growth and therefore the need for food that is rising? And there was a very interesting combination made between Earth observation and artificial intelligence, how the combination of both is not only leading to data, but is actually leading to intelligence, that we are able to really now process all of this data through the use of artificial intelligence and other innovative technologies. And how climate change and the need for sustainability, which is clearly is demand driven, how the combination with this Earth observation and artificial intelligence and everything is a very perfect match actually to address these issues and these challenges. Very specific examples of how EO is clearly a way to tackle illegal fishing activities was brought up in several use cases. When talking about what is really one of the added values and the things that we all should take care of or pay attention to, it's that we have a lot of data, but it's not about the quantity of data. It's obviously about the quality of data, but it's not only the quality of data. It was also discussed that the customer care is an extremely important and more becoming an important asset of the whole segment. The users are, of course, getting more and more skilled and aware of what can be done with EO and how to use EO data and products. But it is also very clear that the less complex it is for the actual end user, the better it is for them. We had an example of how you can ask Alexa to play a song in your house, which has a huge amount of technology behind it. But for the user, the only thing the user has to do is actually request a very simple question, and the technology behind Alexa does the work. And it's the same with the EO data. We need to be able to have a very simple user interface so that the users can just reap the benefits of EO data without having too much of the complexities behind it themselves. We concluded. Yeah, we had a very interesting session, of course, and we concluded then with maybe the €1 million question. There's so much going on already, so much has been done. Earth observation is beautiful and it is so powerful, but it is not fully tapped yet. What should we invest in? And the panelists, they brought up elements such as, from the operational point of view, there are significant barriers still. There's the latency, which is rather slow. So improvements in latency would be able to improve the operational use of Earth observation data. The European Union invested so much in Copernicus, but the regulatory framework can be used to also foster the uptake of EO. I'm going to wrap up now, but one of the elements that was really to pay attention to is that there are so many useful case studies and so many success stories already, and it's really important to tap on that potential and leverage what are currently the success stories. So that's it from my side.
Thank you very much, Karel. This is very insightful indeed. Also picked up a few very interesting points that you have raised, and I think again we can find synergies and similarities between the different sectors. Let's hear now from Dara Boyle from Evenflow, who will tell us about the agriculture session, and let's try to see where all this will come together at the end. I should say also to the audience that you can raise questions in the questions area, so we can pick up a few questions at the end. Please also explain who do you address them to.
Thanks very much, Lev. So I am reporting on the agriculture section. We had a very interesting discussion. We opened with Daniel Azevedo from Copa Cogeca. He introduced the state of play within the industry itself. Obviously, Copa Cogeca represent thousands and thousands of farmers and cooperatives. So he had a good feel of what the industry think about the way the future of the industry and the future of EO within the industry. He said there's a lot of pressure within the industry in the last year, obviously due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but all the supply chains kept moving. They're very proud of that. So I asked them the question about, did they feel they are resilient to issues in the future, and they feel COVID-19 was a real tester for them, but it's really proven to them that yes, they can battle through all this stuff in the sector, and EO has definitely helped them play a part in that. He did call for some new regulatory framework to support further innovation in the sector, specifically targeted to right down to the single farmer level. He spoke about there are many issues with access to broadband, even 4G. No, we're not even talking about 5G, drone licensing issues, new genomic technologies. So moving on from him, Ilias, our EO evangelist, gave us an overview of the current applications for EO in the sector. Obviously, the big ones are precision agriculture, variable rate applications. He also spoke about the upcoming, ongoing, but it's going to be even more focused upon in the future is the Common Agricultural Policy, adopting and encouraging the use of EO and its monitoring and checking for breaches in compliance. He also mentioned insurance, agro insurance. He believes maybe a big sector in the future, which will use EO as part of its compliance checking as well. He did mention there are still some perceptions of complexity of EO and some skills issues. There's also some worries about privacy issues from certain farmers and worry that raw data from EO may not be able to get processed into actual insights. But this is the challenges that the EO providers need to address and prove to farmers that it is possible to get great value out of EO. So some of the further gaps and challenges, going back to Daniel from Copa Cogeca, he talked about the fact that farmers sometimes need to be need to be told that this is purely science-based, it's safe and trustworthy technology, and they can rely on it. Many farmers rely on older forms of growing their crops and different indicators. There are still some that are a little bit hesitant to adopt the new technology. A major gap and challenge is the EO providers understanding what the farmers need, and even the farmers understanding what the EO providers are capable of. So agronomists need to better understand how data processing works, and then vice versa. EO specialists need to understand agronomy better. That was a constant theme of the discussion. Some of the tips, there was a question was asked about what tips would you give to service providers if they want to enter the EO applications for agriculture. One of the main ones was that they should follow the money. So start with the use cases that are currently, the issues that are very currently costly to farmers. If you can tackle them, you can prove the efficacy of EO and the value it can provide to them in their day-to-day lives. Once again, we went back to the whole idea of customized tools. When farmers look out onto the market, they often see the market as huge with so many options, maybe not exactly tailored towards their exact needs. This is a kind of gap that needs to be addressed. It may just be a perception that farmers have, but the whole idea of simplicity and interoperability is something that when the average farmer looks for a technological solution, they're often overwhelmed. Finally, the future applications of EO. Obviously, the big applications are in the variable rate application, crop yield forecasting, but a kind of consensus on the panel was that agri-insurance and yield prediction in the long term is going to be a huge field of growth within agriculture. So the final takeaways really were that EO is quite well integrated in agriculture already. It's well known about. It's not a technology that people aren't aware of. Even despite some confusion and despite the aging workforce, that's not the issue. The real issue, seen from the farmers level, is interoperability and simplicity. You can get one app for one thing, you can get one drone technology for another thing. Not everything works in harmony right now. Not everything is simple to access from one source. And the R&D activities need to be strongly linked to what the farmers on the ground themselves want, and tools that can be easily customized by them themselves. The final comment that was said, is if an EO service provider spends a day with a large farmer, they'll come up with 20 new applications that they may not have never thought of before. So bridging the gap between service providers and real customizable demand from the farmers themselves is really the gap that we have to address.
Thank you, Dara. Thanks for this very nice overview. I think all three rapporteurs have shed light on both challenges and opportunities. Maybe just very quickly summarizing the summary myself. So we heard quite a lot from all three on skills and capacity. We heard also about the valorization of what is being provided. We heard about the simplicity of interfaces, and in the case of agriculture, especially the part about interoperability. But perhaps more interestingly, we heard also things about how the communities basically of the supply and the demand side should work closer together, and how, even with this example now by Dara, if someone would really spend even just one day with the farmer, they would come up with something perhaps a little bit more valuable. Okay, this of course comes as an extreme, but it highlights, I guess, the underlying issue. The regulation point was tangible in all three cases, and of course, de-risking of innovation and how this can be supported through research and innovation. Perhaps what would be an interesting takeaway for all of us after this, and in the meantime, we can see if there is any question to address, is that in a way, it seems that there is still today a barrier when it comes to awareness from the EO side of what the vertical sectors really need, from the vertical sector side of what EO can really provide. And the paradox that was also discussed in the marine session that I was attending is that we need to talk a lot among ourselves until we don't talk anymore about it. And that's where the success will really be achieved. There is one issue raised in the questions, which is about value chains. And I guess this is really what underlines also the point that I was just making. But if any of the rapporteurs want to also comment on that, you're free to do so. So it's the question about what end users are looking for is only information somewhere at a given time period, and they don't care about basically which asset sources or let's say any technological source this comes from. So I think we all agree on that, and actually it was part of the discussions that we attended. So unless anyone wants to share a specific thought on that, I would pass the floor back to Martin, who would close the whole session. All right, thanks very much to the rapporteurs, and the floor is yours, Martin.
Thank you, Lefteris, and to our rapporteurs, of course, for delivering to the audience these summary points and trying to find synergies between these three wonderful sectors. And now we will take a quick 10-minute break to sort out some details on our side before we are joined by Fiammetta Dani from EUSPA and then Emmanuel Pajot, the EARSC Secretary General, for some closing remarks on the Fire Forum. But please do not forget that soon at 5 we will be hosting the live award ceremony, where we will actually have present different types of awards and different winners. I hope to see you all there. Thank you very much.
Pleasure to see you again. So I already heard and received many feedbacks that you had already a lot of good interaction during the parallel session, so I'm really happy about it. The Earth observation evangelist you already interact with, 4 women and 3 men, will contribute in the upcoming months to continue to develop a better understanding of HEO capabilities and user needs amongst targeted industries. Obviously, fire activities will continue as well. We will organize a second round of focus groups and will present results next June during the second fire forum. If you are interested to be involved in this process, you can contact us and follow us on the social media to be well informed. As a continuation of the user needs and user uptake activities, I have the pleasure now to welcome Fiammetta Diani, which will deliver the closing speech of FIRE. A rich professional experience in the market and business development of products and services based on space technologies gives her a result-oriented approach to targeting user communities to adopt HEO solutions in their sectors. Fiammetta has been working at the GSA, now EARSC, since 2009 and was deputy head of market development before she was appointed head of market development in January 19. She has been responsible for transport on governmental segments while supervising the mass market and contributing to some of the agency's major achievements in Galileo adoptions on user uptakes. Before that, she worked for more than a decade in the private sector, both in the aerospace and information technology industry, with a focus on applications on services based on space technologies, GNSS, Earth observation, and satellite communication. Fiammetta, the floor is yours.
So thanks, Emmanuel, and thanks for this good opportunity to close the FIRE forum that I listened carefully together with my team, and we learned many interesting outcomes. So thanks a lot for this opportunity. So I would like to address you a few words of how we see the potential of Earth observation and the role of our new agency, EARSC. So I will share a few slides to help me through these topics, if they can be on screen. Okay, thank you very much. So let me start with you are Earth observation evangelist in FIRE forum. And I wanted to introduce you this very famous evangelist. You will see his face appearing soon, yes. So it's Billy Graham. He had a long life, 100 years, and he was evangelist for 2.5 billion people in one single broadcasting TV in the 60s. So before the internet age, was able to reach this huge amount of people. So we really need a good evangelist also in Earth observation. You know, in Galileo, we reached over 2 billion users, but compared to this man alone, we are nobody. So we really need your help to bring the space use, especially the Earth observation use, to different segments and to different communities. So continue your job. And let me go to some observation about what we can do with our Earth observation. So we think that Earth observation is a key tool for business and environmental challenge. The businesses and our planet are not a dichotomy. We can do the two things together, as also the Green Deal for Europe is demonstrating. So the Earth observation is an important data source for business and organizational intelligence. It's used in many sectors. You explored some. Let me propose some others. Some are in common, some are different. So we do believe on the use in agriculture, in urban planning, in mobility and transport, renewable energy, raw material and construction. We are exploring this industrial ecosystem to make the best use of Earth observation in them. And but as I said, it's not only businesses, also the Earth observation support many challenges we have in Europe. The first one is the European Green Deal, but also the digital strategy and the transformation to the digital age, as well as is a key contributor for the resilience and European recovery. And what we do at EUSPA in this panorama. So the EUSPA is the European Union Agency for the Space Program. Our motto is linking space to the user needs. So we want to be the bridge toward the users. And you know that we have a new space program in Europe today that has been established via the new space program regulation. For the first time, we have under the same umbrella several components of this space program. Some of these components are very well known. For example, Copernicus, our Earth observation flagship, the #1 worldwide provider of space data. And other very well-known components are the one of satellite navigation, of which we were taking care before creation of EUSPA with GSA, that are Galileo and EGNOS. Galileo, our worldwide navigation system, and EGNOS, our regional one that enable many applications in Europe. But there are also some newborn in this space program. For example, the GovSatcom, the secure satellite communication system for governmental users that we are building, and many new others that are upcoming, like situational awareness, EuroQCI, the quantum part, and so on. So a very exciting and well-financed space program we have in front of us. And our agency, EUSPA, will be transversal to this space program component. So for the first time, we will have also a role in Copernicus to promote the market and to promote the user uptake. And this will permit us also to support the innovation. And we'll go to it at the end of my presentation. But let me go back to our flagship in Earth observation in Europe, Copernicus. So it's well known, Copernicus provide very important services, but it's not only the services, it's also a lot of data that we can make available free and openly that enable a lot of potential business. And we want to explore here together also with you and with your contribution, what other users and what other segments and application we can enable and do something to make them growing and becoming real protagonists of Copernicus in the coming years. We also believe in the synergies. So the fact that we have under the same umbrella all these space program components invite us to work on synergies. We are exploring, for example, these synergies in agriculture, where Galileo and EGNOS can be used for precision farming for different applications, while Copernicus and Earth observation can be used to map what is happening in the field, and so to program the intervention then guided by Galileo and EGNOS. Renewable energy, where we can identify the correct site for a wind farm or a solar farm using Earth observation, and then we can fine-tune it using Galileo. And the same in urban planning and in construction. So we are really exploring these synergies with the idea to bring to the user end-to-end solution that bring all together in single products and services and user services, value-added services, this technology together. But we think that we cannot do this alone, of course. We need to do it with all the innovation ecosystem in Europe. And we have a set of tools that are already in place or are coming in place in the next months that will support us in this work. Many of these are research and innovation tools. So here we are, why we are interested also to your inputs. You see the Horizon Europe, the Cassini initiative that you heard also this morning from my colleague that is supporting specifically the startups around Europe. And we have some other tools that challenges, competition, and initiative to support the ecosystem to be more and more innovative and to enlarge the club. We don't want only the usual known actors, but really newcomers, young entrepreneurs to enter in it. And so this brings me to a couple of opportunities that are materializing soon. You heard about it also this morning. So we will have our first Cassini Hackathon in June. That is the digitization of green spaces. And as well as you will hear from us again very soon, because we are going to launch the new call of Horizon Europe. As I think it was already introduced to you, there will be several calls, quite substantial ones inside the space work program of Horizon Europe. The most remarkable and the first one that will come is the one on Green Deal. So here we really ask for GNSS and Copernicus application for challenges like the zero pollution, the secure, affordable and clean energy, the sustainable and smart mobility, the building and renovating in energy and resource efficient way, the farm to fork, and other topics. So this will not be the only call. There will be other calls open at the same time. We will launch it very soon, and so you will hear about it. And as Martina explained, we also put Copernicus inside, and as well as GNSS inside many other topics in Horizon Europe. So stay tuned, because this will be a very important way to innovate. So this conclude a bit my closing remarks. I want to say that space, we consider space as enabler of innovation. So we foster your creativity. We want to hear from your ideas, because we are convinced of this and we want to see it growing even more in the final market segments. So thank you very much for your attention. And I give back the word to Emmanuel.
Thank you, Fiammetta. For sure, you can count on EARSC to support you in the upcoming activities and the actions you will launch. And this concludes the FIRE Forum. I have now to invite you to stay again with us and to join the EARSC Award ceremony, which will start in 10 minutes. We need to change of room for this. And so see you in 10 minutes, and you will have fresh news about the company EARSC will award this year. Thank you.